Hi, I'm Eric Polsky. I'm going to show you how you can embed data from a SharePoint document library into a Power BI report. Now, we don't have to do it this way. We could always just link to a file that's on our local hard drive. The problem is that the data can't be refreshed unless we open up Power BI Desktop and refresh the data manually. If we want to automate this process, what we do is we move our data into the cloud. We put it into SharePoint, in this case a document library. My team can now access the file and make changes to the content of either the Excel spreadsheet or CSV file. And when they're done making those changes, we can dynamically have a refresh scheduled so that once a day or 4 times a day, the data is automatically pulled into Power BI from this SharePoint document. So to make this happen, number one, I have some documents in a document library. I'm going to need to know how to get to that location to embed it. I also have a Power BI report here with nothing in it right now. There's no data at all. So there are several different ways to do this. If you've Googled, you may have found others that you like. But the one I'm about to show you I find to be the most convenient. The first time it's still going to be a little difficult, but after you've done it once, it's really easy to add additional files, and I'll show you what I mean. We need to know the location of this site. Now this is the URL for our company for SharePoint, and then I am on a site called Power BI, which is /sites/PBI. This is the URL that we need to copy. If you're not sure how much of this to grab the whole URL, and then we can just hack off to the next slash one at a time until the thing works. But I'm familiar with this one and I know that this is how it's going to work. We can do the same thing, by the way, for data that's in OneDrive or in Teams because they also use SharePoint. I'm going to copy that URL. I'm going to go to my Power BI, and we have several ways we can achieve this. One of them that you'll see Microsoft recommend is to use, sorry, not SharePoint. There's a feature where you can do web. And they have you use the web interface to pull this data in. And I'm not as big of a fan of this technique because it's harder to reproduce for future reports. What I like better is to search for SharePoint and use the SharePoint online list for lists and folder for files. So I'll show you in a future video how to use the list option, but we're going to use a file that is in a folder in SharePoint. I'm going to tell it to connect, and it's going to ask me, where's that data live? I paste in my site/PBI. It's going to ask me to log in if it doesn't already have that information cached. And the account that you need to use for this is your Microsoft account. Windows won't work because we're not connecting to something inside our network. We're connecting to Microsoft servers in the cloud. We have to use our Microsoft account for this. So I will sign in. It checks to see if I have permission to that SharePoint site and to that specific file. And if I do, it doesn't connect me to the file, it connects me to the folder. Now this seems like a lot. You do not want to combine these because there could be thousands of files in here. We're going to go straight to transform. The beauty of this technique is once we have gotten to this page, the query editor, where it already knows the location of our files, we can reuse this over and over again for future instances. I'll show you what I mean. In this case, let's pull in these sales from Mexico. This is the file I want, and if I'm having trouble finding it because there are so many, we can use all of the normal filters in here to say only show me CSV and maybe Excel files. And that gets rid of a lot of the garbage that might be distracting to us. You can also look for specific folders within SharePoint by filtering over here. I'm going to go with this Mexico sales. Binary is how they say it is a file, and when I click on it, it should access that CSV file. There you go. We can now import that data, but I want to show you, let's say we wanted to pull in an Excel spreadsheet from that same folder. I can right-click, duplicate the existing query, go back to my filter, select a different file. I'll select a Excel spreadsheet this time, and it will erase all of the steps afterwards and give me a new interface connecting to the new data. I'm going to use this currency table because Excel spreadsheets can have multiple sheets and multiple tables in them. And there you go. I'll use my first row as headers, and I now have two separate connections that I was able to do very quickly. The first one is Mexico sales, and this one is a list of conversion rates. I'm not quite done. It looks like I've connected successfully, and I have, but we haven't really achieved the goal that we wanted to achieve, which is I want this data to be something that updates automatically in the cloud. So this data is updatable. I can hit the refresh button right now and it would reload this data. But what I want to do is automate this process so that I don't have to manually refresh the data every day. I want it to automatically refresh every day. So for that to happen, once this data has been loaded, I need to save it and I need to publish it. Now, this report would be really boring if there was nothing on it, so I'll take my data and I will publish it with a report of some sort on here. So let's put in here something like, I'd like to do this by the year for this date, but it doesn't know that this date is a date. So it says it knows it's a date, but I'm not getting a little date picker next to it. I'm not quite sure why sometimes you get the date hierarchy and sometimes you don't. But doing this by date is just too much. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to do this by year. So I'm going to right click, create a new column, and I'll create a year column, getting a little bonus in our video here. And I want to do I'll use the format function for my date. Showing me a 4-digit year. And now I can build a visual that shows sales by year. Lovely report. Okay. I want to publish this. You have to save first. This is a brand new file, so I'll save the file. I'll call this Mexico sales. And then I'll publish it. I have a workspace called Labs that I'm going to use for this. I have grabbed this file from SharePoint and I have embedded it into this report that's now hosted in Power BI. The data is not automatically refreshing right now, so I need to set that up separately. This is the report. I'm going to check it out real quick and make sure it looks right. But there's no way from here for us to force that refresh. We can hit the refresh button in the browser, we can hit this refresh, but they don't force the data set to refresh. For that to happen, I need to go to the data set instead of the report and tell it how to do its update. So I'm going to go to my labs. This is the data set. And I'm going to tell it, hey, could you do a refresh for me? I'm still doing it manually right now, but I'm doing it from the cloud. And I'm watching to see if I get a yellow triangle here. If you get a yellow triangle, what that means is, for some reason, it can't do the refresh. And this happens about half the time for me. When it can't do a refresh, the reason is it needs a little help understanding how to authenticate. In that case, you're going to click on the little ellipse here. You're going to go to Settings. And you'll see a yellow triangle in here telling you that your data source credentials need to be updated. And you'll just come in here, do Edit Credentials. You need it to be OAuth and organizational. For some reason, it fairly regularly doesn't do this properly. So I'm going to tell it to use anonymous for a moment. And it's giving me the yellow warning. So if you see this yellow warning, you need to switch it to OAuth, organizational. It checks to see if you have permission to that data. And now it can update automatically, but it won't unless you go to refresh. This refresh option will be grayed out if your data source credentials haven't been worked through. So if any of these are not working, and that means if you've got 15 data sources going into that data set and one of them doesn't have a good connection, this refresh will be grayed out. All of the things that you want to refresh have to be in that same report, and they all have to be able to be refreshed automatically. You can't have one thing on your C drive and have it work. I'm going to now tell it to refresh this every day at a specific time of day, and there you go. It is now going to automatically refresh my data every morning at 1 a.m. If someone wants to go into the SharePoint site and update the sales data, no one will see that update until after 1 o'clock the next day. I also want to point out that if you do a manual refresh or the automated refresh at 1 a.m. and you still have your Mexico sales report open, the web page doesn't immediately show the results. You may need to wait a few minutes after the refresh happens, and you'll probably, if the report is actually open on your desktop, you're going to have to hit the browser refresh because the page itself isn't dynamic. It doesn't constantly watch for refreshes. So you're going to have to hit refresh so that it updates the data in the page itself. Thanks for watching.